At the sound of the tone, it will be the top of the hour.
It's now time for another episode of Conversations from Soundstage 2D. Once again, we'll explore insights and perspectives with personalities from throughout this wide and wonderful country. It's a never-ending quest for answers and anecdotes. It's all brought to you by 2D Consulting, a leader in providing college athletics programs with a variety of solutions. Visit us at 2dconsultingllc.com. Today's episode, the movies and the one who makes them magic. And now, taking the chair on the soundstage, please welcome Trip Durham.
C.L. Hearn, thank you. And friends, welcome to another stage interview. And today, a visit with someone who sets the stage for so many movies and productions that we've seen over the years. You see his eyes for detail during the film, and then you see his name as the credits roll. In a moment, we'll ask you to welcome Mark Ricker to Soundstage 2D. Mark is a production designer who has received Art Director Guild nominations for excellence in production design for his work on the Academy Award-nominated films of Trumbo, directed by Jay Roach, The Help, written and directed by Tate Taylor, and Julie and Julia, written and directed by Nora Ephron. Mark recently designed the film adaptation for August Wilson's esteemed play, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, that starred Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman, directed by George C. Wolfe for Netflix. He designed the comedy Snatch, directed by Jonathan Levine, and Keeping Up with the Joneses, that was directed by Greg Mottola. He was educated both at UNC Chapel Hill and from NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. Having watched him in stage productions in high school, I am thrilled to welcome onto Soundstage 2D, ladies and gentlemen, a rousing welcome for Mr. Mark Ricker.
Hi, Trip. How you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll find ourselves with a pretty good banter here. So if you're ready to go, we can get started.
Absolutely.
So right out of the gates, Mark, while our audience may have a sense for the role of a production designer, can you better define it for us so that we've got an idea of what it is you actually do?
Sure. I basically run the art department, which is the department on television, any production, television show, feature film, these days limited television. It can take any kind of form. But essentially, I design the physical production, create the world in which the storytelling happens, and that basically oversees coming up with doing a lot of historical research, depending on what the subject is. I design the sets if we build them on sound stages. I oversee the selection of locations and decide with my team how we will adapt those locations, depending on what the needs of the show are, from logistical considerations to if it's a period film, directing, making alterations to the place, covering up modern elements or bringing in period elements that'll sort of create the world. I mean, essentially, as I've explained this before, it's part interior design, part architecture, historian, graphics design, landscape design is sort of, I can't really do any of those things for real, but I can fake combining them all into a combo platform, just for the sake of where to put the camera and create a world that people watch.
That's a great bit of background and a lot of stuff there that we'll unwind as we get into our conversation. Take us back to your time growing up in Burlington, North Carolina. Alamance County was not exactly the bastion for wannabe actors, directors, and production designers.
Yeah, no, I felt like sort of a one-man band to a degree. I was always interested in, I think I just was a fan of movies from when I was a small kid, and had some sort of idea that I wanted to work in that business before I even knew what that actually meant. I mean, I think at the time when I was a kid, it was either going to be an actor or to be a director. And so I created little film projects, and I was heavily involved in theater, local theater. I mean, it started with children's theater and went into high school productions, and the local community theater in Burlington was a place where I was able to sort of, they gave me the keys to the kingdom. It was a small kingdom, but I was able to just kind of make it my own and figure out, really sort of developed a sense of what it meant to design a world, even if it was at that point on a theater stage. It was a great school for me to just sort of develop all of that. And then I had the great luck of, in the mid-'80s, when we were in high school, was when the film industry took a shine to North Carolina as a whole. There was a film commission that really championed productions to come there. It was a right-to-work state, so there was a flexibility in terms of hiring and also just, the fantastic variety of landscapes. So at the time, I just sort of latched on to productions. It's like joining the circus. You just, you go once and you either stick with it or you get off that train and go do something else. And I just stuck with it. I had the great luck of having the industry come to my backyard, and I took advantage of it.
So was there a seminal moment? You talk about watching movies as a kid, so there's a slow ramp up in watching movies, getting interested. You mentioned the film commissions and the way North Carolina then became attractive to production companies. Was there a seminal moment in which you said, okay, yes, this is it. The light bulb is certainly turned on and I am going to go full bore?
Again, it was all sort of a pipe dream until I was in college. Bull Durham came to town. I mean, it was a film that at that point I literally sent in a photograph to be an extra. For some reason, which I still do not know to this day, they called me and asked if I would come into their office and meet them and coordinate. They needed a sequence. There was a montage sequence in the film where the guys were on the road and they were just filming in a lot of small ballparks around North Carolina. And so they sent me up with a poster and a table and a list, and I would go into malls, and that was where I just got to, it was like literally a foot in the door, and I didn't let the door shut, and I just hung out on set. It was just, literally a fantasy come to life, because a lot of those sequences that we were shooting all night long, and you just hang out under the lights at the Durham Bulls ball field, and it was Kevin Costner and Susan Sarandon, and I just sort of got the lay of the land. That was when I discovered that there was even such a thing as an art department. And so from artistic projects, from being in school and designing theater on stage, I just was able to then, I think that was maybe the light bulb that you're talking about, where I just connected the dots and realized, there's actually a very specific thing I could pursue here.
In our intro of you, we mentioned North Carolina, Chapel Hill. English was your major. So Bull Durham comes along, production in 86, 87. How did you maintain that interest as an English major, knowing that you were not theater production or anything along those lines as an undergrad?
I really just used that as a liberal arts. I wanted to get, I did an internship in Los Angeles at some point between high school and college, I think. And there was one seminar where a speaker from the LA Times really championed all of these young sort of kids who were from across the country, went to Los Angeles and had movie stars in their eyes. And they all thought that they were going to be the next Steven Spielberg writing the brilliant script. And she said, don't go to film school, get an English degree, get a history degree. And I heard that loud and clear, and I realized you need an education. You need to know how to tell a story before you could tell a story in whatever form that storytelling is. And for me, in the world of design, once I ended up pursuing higher education at NYU, it really served me well in terms of understanding texts, developing text in terms of how it translates into design. I had the foundation for a broader education. So I still dabbled. I was in Chapel Hill with my English degree, but I traveled still back to Burlington to design productions at that community theater, did one Tennessee Williams at Chapel Hill. But other than that, it wasn't a professional. I was still trying to figure out exactly what niche I would find at that point, because Bull Durham was the one thing. The Handmaid's Tale was another project that I worked on at the time. Then I had a third one, and by then I pretty much knew where I was headed.
To me, with the advice that you received about your major and then your decision for grad school and continuing ed, all that sounded really calculated. So was your decision to go to NYU's Tisch School of the Arts Was that also a calculated move? Did you look at other options? How was it that you decided to take your stuff to the next level?
I didn't pursue a lot of schools. There are limited graduate programs in design. NYU at the time did have a specific strain of art direction, which is, again, specifically designing for film and television. At that point, I had worked on a few other films, Last of the Mohicans. I was literally on a mountaintop when I realized that I wanted to pursue higher education and not work my way up through the business. At that point, I realized that the art department was something I wanted to do. I had met enough production designers, and it was just, I wanted to be the designer and not a set dresser or a prop assistant or any number of fantastic jobs that exist within the art department. But I think that I just wanted to have that collaboration of storytelling with director and cinematography and really just create the vision. So NYU, long-winded answer, was one of the few renowned institutions that has a design program at a graduate level, and specifically had coursework in art direction. So, and it was on the East Coast, and at that point I had moved to New York. I moved to New York straight after I graduated Chapel Hill, did some time there, came back and was actually working on Mohicans back in North Carolina when I applied to NYU, and it just made sense. It was bringing me back to New York. It was where a lot of the crew members that I'd worked with had traveled down from New York to work in North Carolina and kept me on the East Coast. And
your early days speak to a path that could be translated to any industry. Get your foot in the door, take what you can get, make a name for yourself. So as you were working on Last of the Mohicans, the Thomas Crown Affair, Shipping News, were you indeed taking all that you could? Were there times in which you actually had to say no because maybe it did not line up to what your career wanted to be?
Yeah, no, at that point I was literally, it was the dawn of my career. I was just hungry to have any experience, anybody who would have me come along for the ride. That production of The Handmaid's Tale, which people may not know, was a feature film that was made back in 89 or 90 before it was the TV series on Hulu. I had read the book and written a term paper on it at Chapel Hill and was determined to, when they brought the production to Durham, there was no way I was not going to work on that film. And so I literally banged on the door and had it shut in my face about 1,000 times, it seemed like, until somebody, the art director on that film, heard that I was out there and brought me on board. So it was just, at that point, it was taking every opportunity I could get to just sort of, carve this out for me, no matter what it was. And then as I pursued it, even after NYU, there was a strategic bent to my career where I was still working as a set designer on studio films. I was art directing sort of medium budget things, and I was designing very low budget things and doing them all simultaneously because I looked at it as a specific way to just learn everything I would need to do at all levels. And it was convenient that the pay rate was sort of keeping me, they paid me the same things. It's like my rate as a designer at that point was low. So it matched my rate as a draftsman sitting at the drawing table. So from a financial point of view, it all made sense. But from a brain filling point of view, it was very enriching to just be able to go back and forth like that.
It's almost a midway point of our time with Mark today. We will step aside for a quick commercial break to hear from our sponsor. But on the other side, we'll have a few questions for Mark from our Soundstage audience, and we'll ask him to let us in on some secrets of the trade and what makes for a successful scene in a movie. So grab some popcorn. We'll be right back.
Today's show is being brought to you by 2D Consulting, LLC, a company designed to assist you in external relations assessments, special sports-related projects, designing and facilitating staff retreats, and more. And coming this fall, the 2D Collaborative, a gathering of professionals who possess an intense desire to support the operations of college athletics and the entire campus community. Learn more at 2dconsultingllc.com.
We welcome you back to Soundstage 2D as we continue our visit with Mark Ricker, A production designer, Mark's first movie production experience was, in other things too, handing out hot dogs to movie extras on the set of Bull Durham. So, Mark, you design a montage scene, and then they tell you to hand out hot dogs and mustard, right?
It's very glamorous business.
Mark, we have some questions from our studio audience, but before we get to that, how do you start that planning process when beginning work on a new production?
It really, it starts with the script. I get a call from my agent, or if it's people that I've already worked with before, they initially just, introduce the project to me. I start with reading the material, seeing if I'm interested in being involved, if I think it's well written. Assuming that happens, I'll interview and meet with, usually it's the director of a film. And then once hired, it just starts with research. I've done a lot of period films. And so with that, of all ages, I've gone from the 20s, probably hit at every decade of the 20th century. And so it just starts with research. If I've also, as it would happen, have done a fair amount of biopics. So, everybody from Julia Child to James Brown to Jack Kevorkian and more in between. So I just start researching everything in terms of what the world was that they lived in and as it corresponds to the script, and just compiling a vast wealth of research so that we've got the Bible and eventually I can give that to my crew and everybody's looking at the same points of research. That's where it starts, and it sort of turns into, if it's trying to figure out, then if it gets into sort of like a nuts and bolts thing, what feels like from a budgetary point of view or what is sort of a story driven point of view would dictate what sets we want to build on stage, what we want to do in terms of looking for locations, and then that process starts. Everything just sort of starts simultaneously, hiring crew, dispersing responsibilities, and it's a vast crew. It's set decorators, art directors, designers, graphics, construction, scenics, painters, props, costumes, landscape. It is truly, and those are just the people working within the art department. And then there's the collaboration with the cinematographer, the director, the producers, the actors, anybody else. So it's a whole world that exists unto itself, that follows a certain blueprint. Like, everybody knows where their marching orders are, but the specifics of each individual project is what creates a rich experience of doing this. The projects can last anywhere from a few months to, longer ones. These days where you work on a limited series, it can really stretch because you're doing 9-10 hours of television. It's fascinating and involved. I love it.
More of my questions in a moment, Mark, but we do have a couple of questions that have been submitted from our Soundstage audience, and this one comes from Callie from Charleston, South Carolina. Callie wants to know, Mark, seemingly there are endless possibilities to how a scene can be set. How do you know when you think you've made the final stage setting and have it the best it can be? How do you know that you are done with a particular scene?
In one ways you could argue that you're never really done. Sometimes the done is defined by the cameras need to start rolling and you just need to dive out of the way and hope for the best. And even if it's not quite there the way we shoot, sometimes I can get back in there and make it better for the second take, and you just know that the editing process is going to, help you along in that process. But pretty much I think that, again, there's sort of a checklist of knowing what's required in a scene. If they're in a bedroom looking through a closet, you have to make sure that there's a closet. And then again, in terms of working with decorators and coming up with the details, I think it's just a knowing satisfaction that if you believe it and you're pleased with what it is, then you walk away and you invite the crew. There's also obviously a relationship with the director who weighs in on that. And, again, sometimes it could just never be done, but you just have to walk away.
One other question, and it plays to your final bit of the last answer. Joseph from Storrs, Connecticut, how do you balance your vision that you have set for yourself with the vision and the expectation of the director?
Again, that comes out of a lot of conversation, collaboration. You look at a lot of research there's a lot of show and tell. You can come up with mood boards. It's like palette, color, shape, set designs, models, virtual models. Everything's presented ahead of time. So hopefully by the time we've created it all, there's no surprises and a director's going to walk onto the set and be happy. I knock wood, have never had the experience of the opposite of that. I've heard of those situations, or an actor not liking the color of a wall or something, and that can turn into a nightmare, but I've never had that experience. Sometimes it's a little bit of arm twisting. I was in a situation yesterday, actually, with a director who were working on a TV show. There were elements of a townhouse that we're trying to recreate that we're having a little bit of a difference of opinion as to some elements that I want to bring in that he's afraid might be, not to his liking. So I've decided to just sort of like recess for a moment and let it marinate, and then we'll revisit it once I can come up with some additional presentation pieces. But pretty much it's just, as with everything, it's collaboration and conversation and teamwork.
Joseph and Callie, thank you for your questions. And with our next soundstage guest, we'll invite the audience to present a couple of more thoughts. Mark, everybody seems to have a professional sweet spot. I know that I have one in what I do for a living. Is there a particular genre? Is there a style? Is there an element of movie and magic that just really seems to hit your sweet spot? Is there just one particular go-to that you find yourself in a zone?
By design or not, I don't know. I found myself in the zone of doing period films, and for a while there was a particular period of the early 60s, and really I sort of lived in the 60s for a while with The Help and with the Lyndon Johnson movie I did, some of James Brown movie I did. I mean, a lot of them land there. I tend to like the experience of doing period films. I just like the research. I like recreating a world that doesn't exist anymore. Pretty much it starts with the text, with the material. I mean, I have to have a foundation of being interested in of wanting to live in the world of creating a story for a long time. I mean, I sort of just put a button point on, I've not done science fiction. It's not necessarily at the forefront of interest to me, but there's vastly different ways in order to tell a science fiction story. Pretty much, I do enjoy period films. I did them so long for a while that I actively did sort of pursue Keeping Up with the Joneses, which you mentioned earlier, was like that script came along and I hadn't done a big studio action comedy, but it was a different experience that I wanted to have just to mix it up. Snatched was a movie that took place in Colombia, and I'd never done that. I actively pursued that. It also came to me, my agent called me and said, Amy Schumer, Meryl Streep in Hawaii. And I said, just sign me up. I don't need to know anything else. It turned out not to be Meryl Streep, but we did end up there with Goldie Hawn. And it was great to live in Hawaii for 6 months.
You mentioned the colors of the wall by an actor. You've never been in that situation. But does set design, is it ever influenced by the personality of, say, a John Hamm or a Hilary Swank? Are there people that you are designing who are going to be in the scene? Are any of the designs based on their own personalities and what type of motif they're bringing to the screen?
I mean, not really. I mean, they are actors who are hired to play characters, and so they are as well, I think, mostly leaning towards serving the production. I mean, there are personalities out there who can influence this kind of thing, but I personally haven't had that kind of experience.
Well, we have set an amazing foundation for our final couple of questions, and I'm sure it's everything that everybody wants to know. So question number one, take us behind the ropes, behind the curtains. Tell us something as movie watchers that we would not have noticed, that we need to start noticing, things about your trade, which will make us sit back and go, oh, wow, I never thought about that.
I would say that, maybe people who aren't aware of it when they watch anything on television is just the understanding of how many people, how many moving parts, how many pieces of the puzzle literally are. It's like when you throw the puzzle box open and they're just all scattered, and our job is to put it all together. But you could literally walk out. You could be in a living room on a sound stage, walk out the door, and you're in another country on the other side of the world, and it's keeping all of those pieces together so that it tells a cohesive visual story, so that it makes sense. I mean, literally just in the course of shooting in a room on a set, in order to get one angle, that means the entire room behind the camera is taken apart. All of the furniture's taken out so that it makes room for the lights and the camera and the dolly track and the boom and everything. And then when you turn around to get the other actor, it's all of the equipment's taken out and the whole room's put back together, and then the camera goes to the other side. I mean, this is even the simplest way of describing it, but every single thing you see in a film is a piece of a larger puzzle, and it never exists except for those magical moments when I worked with Ben Stiller in one of his favorite movies is is Last of the Mohicans. And we were scouting for this project that I did with him on a mountain, and he was quoting Daniel Day-Lewis, and I just looked at him and said I was about 12 feet away from him when he said that. And Ben Stiller looks at me and goes, "That is so cool." So it's just all, part of the experience of a million different pieces.
So metaphorically, you talk about the pieces, but literally, where do these pieces come from? The props that we see on set, and then where do they go afterwards?
They come from everywhere. I mean, in Los Angeles, there is a wealth of prop houses that you can scour, and you can literally see pieces that you remember from. I mean, they go back to the dawn of cinema, to 100 years of props. I had to get a stagecoach once, and you go to Universal and you go into the barn where all of the stagecoaches still are that were used in the John Ford movies. I mean, it was amazing. And you can walk aisles and aisles of furniture and props. And at this point, I've seen things that I've bought on location that has been shipped back to LA to go into the prop house. So you also just go to antique malls, you buy it in the stores, you buy it on eBay, you buy it on Craigslist. It just comes from everywhere. And then depending on the project, as I just said, it can get sucked into it's like Citizen Kane, some of this stuff. It just gets sucked into the warehouses and the storage facilities. A lot of times we sell stuff on the help. We had a giant sale and hundreds and hundreds of people. And we had a lot of stuff that we had accumulated. People wanted a piece of the movie, so they all came and they bought it. So things are dispersed everywhere. I actually I returned to Mississippi to do the James Brown movie and went back in some of the same antique stores and saw things that we had bought on the help that were still sort of being publicized as used in the help. And it's funny, I came across a couple pieces and went, this wasn't in the help. Because I knew them intimately. So yes, some of it ends up in my little apartment. I tend to take like a small souvenir that means something and save it.
Is there one souvenir that you've held on to that seems to mean more than most?
A hot dog from Bull Durham.
So last question, Mark Ricker, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh, Lord, I guess I'm doing it, but it's still a sort of reinvention every day. I mean, just want to be an explorer, so I'm lucky enough to be doing that in the shape that I have chosen.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is Mark Ricker. A round of applause. Mark, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Trip.
Folks, we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Be sure to subscribe to Conversations from Soundstage 2D, and make sure you share each episode on your own social channels. CL, take us away.
This has been another brilliant episode of Conversations from Soundstage 2D. Join us again next time as our host, Trip Durham, sits with another dynamic personality whose stories will both inform and enlighten. And now, stay tuned for the continuing adventures of Detective Rainbow and her faithful assistant, Captain Checkers. My name is C.L. Hearn, wishing that all of your days are filled with wonderful conversations.